Hello, NFT land. I am back. I'm Creatorius Rex. And today we have an artist spotlight. And when we do the artist spotlights, my pal Skojo joins us. Skojo, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you tonight?
I'm doing really well. So, Skojo, known as Josh Scott, in his studio. What are
Yes,
you
I
making
am.
there, Skojo? What
What
do
am
you
I
got in
getting
the
here?
back? What do you got in the background? Are you working on a project right now?
I'm always working on stuff. I got some laser cats. I think I got an old piece that I'm just like cleaning up the background.
Well, the
Yeah,
world needs more laser cats. People should
right.
know that the laser cats predated the Bitcoin laser eyes by many years.
That is true.
So that's,
I
you're a
want a
trend,
royalty. Give me a royalty.
you're a trendsetter. Okay, well, but you know what? Tonight is not about you and me.
No.
Tonight is about the artist spotlight. And today we have Michael Pierre Price. Michael, welcome.
Thanks.
We're happy to have you on the Niftorian show.
Great. Glad to be here.
So, Michael Pierre Price grew up in Indiana, earned a degree in physics, and even did graduate work in theoretical astrophysics. And then, for some very good reason, which I'm sure we'll hear about tonight, he left academia to pursue game design. He had an extremely successful career spanning 30 years, where he worked on some titles you may have heard of, like Dungeons and Dragons. Then he left gaming just a little over 10 years ago. And since then, Michael has developed a signature style blending psychology, spirituality, and obviously some math to create beautifully intricate and very, very interesting images. I met Michael through the Techspressionist movement, and we are really, really fortunate that Michael has lended his talents to create a wonderful owl mint pass for us. Michael, we are still zooming into that image and looking at all the amazing details. It's crazy. Michael, welcome. Good to have
Thank you. Thanks, Gojo. Thanks, Brett.
you.
Well, so this is great because you're really interested in a lot of the things I'm interested in. But let's talk about physics. So did you intend originally to be a physicist, or was it just
Yeah.
you're in school and physics was sort of a cool major because of your background and you just took it? Was it momentum or inertia, or was it like really deliberate choice?
It was a deliberate choice. Even as a kid, I was always interested at how things worked. Not mechanically necessarily, but the theoretical underpinnings. When I remember looking up at the sky at night, I got a telescope when I was a kid, and I just wanted to understand how it all came together, how things, very far away and very small things, how they're all interconnected and what was behind it all. And as I got a little older, going through high school, physics and math just seemed the way to go to really get a solid sense of that. And I was really drawn to it. So I figured that physics was going to be a career for me. Didn't turn out that way, but that was my intent.
That was your intent. So I'm tempted to ask, where did it all go wrong?
Whoa. So I was in grad school for astronomy and astrophysics.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this wonderful advisor who I got along really well. We did a paper together, which was published in the American Journal of Physics. So I published. So that was awesome. But he left. He got a job in Illinois. This was at the University of Toledo, and I got a new advisor who was the chairman of the department. Brilliant astronomer, but we just didn't mesh. And so for me, it really put me off balance as to what to do. And as a kid, I always loved making games, but never thought that would ever be a career. I didn't even know people could earn any kind of living. This was pre-video games. So this was, all board games, traditional games, but I loved war games. I loved the Avalon Hill games and all of that. And I happened to see an ad that TSR, the people who made Dungeons and Dragons, this was in 1980, they were looking for game designers. Just on a lark, I just said, okay, well, let's see. Well, they loved that I could write English sentences and that I was literate. And because they were looking to expand not only fantasy genre role-playing games, they were looking to do science fiction and a number of other things as well. My science background came in handy. I got hired. It was a phone interview. I'd never been to Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, which is where they were located. And then at the end of the academic year, I moved out there and started a 30-year career, unbeknownst to me at the time, that I was going to be doing this for 30 odd years in one form or another. Yeah.
That's amazing. So were you a fan of like Philip K. Dick or Heinlein?
Heinlein for sure. Dick, yes. Even though the style of writing and the subject matter was not necessarily as interesting to me. Heinlein for sure, because I love the harder sciences, and he had interesting things. And obviously, like, I loved Foundation Trilogy. Asimov is brilliant, and so yeah, there was definitely growing up. I was very much into science fiction, and then once I read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, then that was another thing that branched out for me, and that's where the D&D connection for me ended up kind of paying off as well. So,
were you a Dungeons and Dragons player at that time?
I had played a little bit, so it really was at that stage just breaking into a more broader based audience at that point, but it was still pretty much college kids and really, really nerdy high school kids that were really on the fringe, because it still hadn't gained that momentum and traction. This was pre the Christian right freaking out, and I guess it was CBS or whoever did the big expose on the kid that got lost in the dungeon, underground tunnels, and so it was way before all of that kind of mania happened. So yeah, I was like I don't remember exactly what number employee I was, but I was there pretty early on. Yeah.
Got it. Well, and at the time, I guess I think the description you said basically is very niche at the time. I think it's much more broadly. There's a much broader interest in that today. But I think it's actually really interesting you bring up Tolkien, because someone described you as the White Wizard at some point to me. So Gandalf the White, yes, Tolkien.
It wasn't me.
It might have been
maybe more the gray. I'm not sure if I'm at the white stage yet.
Okay, Gandalf the Gray. I don't know. I mean, your powers with AI might actually get you there. Might help you bridge over.
All right, fair enough.
Okay, so you've been a game designer for many years, and it'd be interesting for me to understand how your experience as a game designer leads into or influences your artwork today.
That's a great question, and I think it's one major ingredient of several. But for me, again, going back to like my self-identity, I have always been a highly creative person. Even as a child, I knew that I wanted to create things. And I was fortunate enough growing up in the very industrial Midwest to have some college jobs that were highly manual labor intensive.
Right.
And I appreciate those people who can do that. But for me, I could tell right away, like, I could never do this. I could never sustain this because I felt like my whole being was shutting down. I need to be creative. So that physics helped me to be creative. Game design helped me to be creative. But the thing that finally got to me near the end of my game industry career is that there was, as an independent, which is what I was for the vast majority of my career, you're always searching for the money, the next project. And even though games are creative and you go and, new genres are created all the time, for the people that hold the money, they tend to be very conservative. So, they want the latest Grand Theft Auto, make us one of those, and then, we'll sell millions, and you'll be rich and we'll be rich. So there's a lot of me too.
Yes.
I hate that to the core of my being. I don't like to do the same thing over and over. So I got to the point where it's like, I just want to do what I want to do. I was fortunate at that time to have made enough money, married, and we were good financially. My wife's got a nice career. So I just said, I'm going to do my own thing. And I'm very lucky that way. Because I realize that for most artists, especially starting out, that's a luxury if you have that opportunity. So I would say game design really afforded me an easy step into technology-based artwork, because the last 20 or more years of my game design career, I was heavily steeped in seeing the evolution of technology firsthand. And so that gave me a leg up in feeling very comfortable to step into the use of technology for artwork. My creativity is, my own thing. So there you have it. And I think that it's served me very well. I wasn't afraid to try out new things, to go and see what's happening. And I always like to learn, which I highly encourage people to always be learning.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, I'd like to go out and blaze new trails. So I not want to just use a canned piece of software and be happy with it. I want to break it. I want to twist it. I want to, shift it in some way. And so for me, technology then becomes a tool set that I utilize, whether it's AI, whether it's fractals, whether it's, innovative uses of Photoshop, what have you. So my long-winded answer to your question.
I think that's great. Scojo, what's your reaction to that?
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, I actually just had a follow-up, which is when I look at your work, I'm always wondering, do you look at it as I want to create some kind of code to create this image, or do I have an idea of image first, and then how do I go about creating code? Tell me about the order and how does that play into your process?
There is that's a great question. And this is the thing where, for me, this idea of process is an interesting question and discussion, because for me, my process is not formulaic. It is more driven by my interests, my inspirations, what I may have played around with previously, and I saw some threads that I didn't follow that I thought were interesting. So for me, my process is, where's my inspiration, or where are my interests at this time? And what's in my bag of tricks to maybe start that exploration. For me, I'm an explorer. My art process is about exploration. The most times that I have something maybe pre-thought out in my mind will be for the pieces that tend to be a bit more in the realm of where I'm doing actual kind of surrealistic kinds of imagery where you can see actual objects and things like that. I will usually have maybe some ideas of a story idea in my head, and that I will then use some of my 3D software and play around with that, and then maybe add some other elements. But for my abstract pieces, it's usually, it can be driven by, okay, I was thinking about looking at AI in a certain way. What might be there? But it's a starting point that doesn't know where the end is. A lot of my work is being the explorer into, terra incognita.
And experimenting, right? And seeing where it leads, and then finessing and changing along the way.
But I can do that more confidently today because of the last 10 years. It's like somebody who's a traditional abstract painter who might do gestural painting. You get to know your materials. You kind of know what they're going to act like on the canvas. You know how runny to make your paints or how thick to make your paints. Same if you're a airbrush artist, you kind of know the tricks of the trade, and you're more confident in playing around with stuff and experimenting.
Okay, so you started full-time as an artist about 10 years ago, is that correct?
Yeah.
Had you been messing around with being an artist before that? I mean, what was your journey? Was it a heartbreak? Evolution?
So as a small, so the last 10 years of my game design career, I was really running a small studio. So I was both acting in a dual role as a lead game designer, but also as the chief creative officer. So I was overseeing a small team of artists and programmers and kind of shepherding the projects from start to finish, especially looking at it from the creative side of the equation. That really, that experience and the projects that I worked on really gave me more hands-on working on artwork and seeing what worked, seeing what I liked, seeing what like the art director would like, and we had back and forth. So it really got me thinking about the visuals and what made for an interesting game, more than just the mechanics of the gameplay, but also how the visuals get tied in. And obviously, as our hardware and game machines have advanced, there's been a preponderance on the visuals, making things more realistic.
Right.
The graphics engines, I mean, things are crazy versus when I was working initially on ColecoVision. We had 16 colors to play with at that point. So, I mean, the texture maps in games these days are bigger than the entire game code was for ColecoVision games back when we were making those kinds of 2D games at that point. So I would say that really gave me more familiarity, not only with Photoshop, but with 3D software, and a few other things that I felt comfortable making the transition. It was really a pretty hard and fast, I'm not doing this full time anymore. I have taken on a few projects here and there, but my heart's in the artwork now. And so that's I'm really happy doing what I'm doing.
I believe you. I just think it's really interesting. So it's one thing for Skojo to be like, to decide, oh, I'm going to go to art school, and then logically, throughout his career, be an artist, right? It's another for someone to start as a physicist, go into more creative disciplines, being in game design. Although there's an insight here, right? Because you're essentially a producer, or you're a creative director. So you were conceiving of these things. Maybe you're even doing a little manipulation, but mostly you were basically outsourcing the art to somebody else. Someone on the team. But I'm still interested in just the mindset that goes from, well, I don't know when you decide, like, next year I'm just going to be a full-time artist, or like, no, like, I think 2 weeks from now would be a good time to start. I mean, like, what was it? Just like you flipped a switch and say, well, why don't I just become an artist? Like, how is that even a thing?
Well, that's a great question. And actually I think it was a little gradual happening. Because I would say the last 3 or 4 years, I wasn't running an active studio at that point. I was working pretty much on projects as a freelancer. And the thing is, I was trying to propose projects. I was trying to do some radically new things. And the market has changed. I mean, with the advent of all the cell phone technology, all the smartphones, tablets, and everything else, there are more avenues now for independent game development than there ever was back in the day. The thing is, you still need money. You still need people who are mature enough to see a project from start to end. I can't tell you the number of projects I have seen other people start that just fizzle out because, oh, we're going to make a game. It sounds all fun, and it's all fun and games till the blank hits the fan. And there's the hard truth that it takes endurance to see a game from start to finish. I mean, it's a even with smaller projects, but bigger projects, then it really is the case. But so my level of frustration, I think, started to just grow, especially over the last 3 or 4 years, that I was still trying to make games and do things more actively. During that time, I thought that I wanted to do something new, and art seemed to be a good creative outlet. Now, I thought I would start that way through photography. So I got a digital camera. I was trying to do creative photographs. And that was my early transition into artwork, was through photography. I liked it. I found it very interesting. And I was trying to do some interesting things. I hit kind of a roadblock for me, or I wasn't as proficient as I wanted to be to hit the level of artistry that in my head I was trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
So that transition then into starting to looking at fractals, Photoshop manipulation, and other techniques that would take it from strict photography. I used photographs sometimes, but then I was doing very heavy manipulations and other things, which was interesting. But it slowly evolved over a several year period where the photography really just went to the background. And now I still enjoy doing photography, but it's more as a hobby and not in any sort of professional standpoint. So it was a slow transition, but I would say the game market itself is what really sort of pushed me out the door, if you will, that I wasn't getting the satisfaction and the creative outlet that I was hoping for. And looking in this other direction, I could do my own thing. I didn't have to justify it to anybody else. I did want people to buy the work, and I did want, for people to say, oh, this is really kind of cool. We like what you're doing. But it wasn't the driving force for me. And having been in a hit-driven industry, which music and movies and games are all, hits drive all the other projects that never make much money or lose lots of money. And that after 30 years, that just wore on me. And it's like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm getting too old for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love this story too, because there's so many people that I think historically have thought, oh, well, I've had this whole other career. I'll never be an artist. Like it's really never too late to start.
I know it's crazy, but I don't know. Maybe, maybe I'm the Grandma Moses of technology art. I don't know.
That's so you're no longer the wizard. We're now calling you Grandma Moses.
I just, for me, retirement is death. So I want to do this till I fall over dead. I'm enjoying it. And it, like I said, I recognized at the core of my being, I'm a creator. And this is fulfilling that for me. Yeah. So I do feel really lucky that this is even turned out to be as satisfying and as interesting as it's turning out to be. I just feel like technology is still kind of leading the way for new things. And I like that. It just suits me. And I love being around younger people that keep me on my toes, and they see the world so differently because, my childhood was very pre-digital. Right. The internet was, not even a spark in anybody's imagination at that point. You look at the old Star Trek, it's, nobody even imagined the internet that I could, that I was aware of. So yeah, it's been cool to see all this evolve over time.
So Skojo, what was it about Michael's art that made you want to recruit him for the Niftorian Mid-Pass?
Oh my gosh. Well, I've known Michael from the Techspressionist group, so I've seen his work, and I saw the stuff he did for his last solo show, which was amazing. And it's just so intricate. It's so interesting. There you go. There's a piece. I mean, do you have the before and after, the process? Because what's really cool about this is we asked the artist to give us these process shots, and Michael was kind enough to really show how this thing was built, and you can kind of see the eyes forming this kind of skeletal skull there, and then the beak, and then it just emerges, and you start to see this owl form out of this image and expand and replicate, and it's so incredible. I mean, I would just say just beautiful, intricate work. Michael's a really interesting guy, and yeah, it seemed like a natural fit to bring him into this.
Okay, so Michael, explain to us what's going on here.
Wow. Okay, so I knew right away that I didn't want to do some stylized owl. I just knew that right away. So I started thinking about the key elements that you all had asked for the artist to use in creating the artwork. And I got thinking about how do people these days learn about things? They go online, maybe most people have never even seen an owl in the wild. Maybe they've seen it at a zoo or what have you. So then I started thinking about owl as a concept and concepts, and how do we learn about things? How do we, an owl, the word owl is a conceptual word because owls are, tangible things. There are certain kinds of owls. We use words all the time very symbolically. So I went that route that that initially I wanted this image to almost look like it was from the base of the skull to the shoulders of somebody's spinal column, so their nervous system, so that the owl exists in their head from whatever, for whatever reason they wanted to know about owls. So I went with the whole internet information idea and how intricate all of that is, and all our neural systems and how we make things real. And so that's why I did the imagery that Skojo was talking about, like with the owl skull and the wings, to be blended in so that you don't really see it, but you know that it's there if you see the other images. And for me, that was my highly conceptualized concept of the owl, based on humans looking at what an owl is in today's modern technology-based driven society. And that was the reasoning for this whole intricate, and I used a fractal based image to create most of this intricate center part, and then did some other code manipulations to tailor it to this whole idea.
Okay, so I have lots of questions about this.
Yeah, sure.
So I look at this and I'm like, the first time I saw it, I'm like, okay, I see the owl in there. So this is like owl meets Escher meets Blade Runner meets the Eiffel Tower, right?
Okay.
It's like
Tower, nice.
I see all these different things in it, right?
That's awesome.
And the interesting thing about it too is I initially I was like, well, is this a view into a dystopian future? But it's not. I mean, it's gray and it's got that sort of Blade Runner-ish kind of concept to it, but it's not, because it's bright in the background. And so there's actually some hope and interest in it. Yeah. Okay. So just in terms of the technique here. So the part with the owl, the dark gray part, that's all generative. Is all of it generative, or is the background where it's lighter, is that another technique?
Most of it is generative, fractal based imagery. And I played around with having the darker part in the foreground with the light in the background. And there were several reasons for that conceptually. Even though I was going with the idea of the spinal column, like I said, and kind of consciousness, the background, which is light, for me was like the illumination of consciousness and how we envision things. And it's really interesting. The other point, because Skojo asked me about this after he initially saw it, he asked me, "Are you going to make this in color?" And I was going to respond, but I didn't have time to respond. And then he sent me another email back or a message back saying, "Everybody loves it. Don't worry about adding color at all." And the reason that I went with black and white and gray is, once again, this was basically looking at owls from our consciousness, from our brains. That color, we learn color through the electrical impulses that go into our brain, and our brain interprets it. So that's why I didn't want to have any color at all, because this is all highly conceptual. But I'm glad you saw those things. But yes, the lightness there for me was the illumination of consciousness. And I do see where we're going, as, there's a strong duality here. I mean, we can look around us and see all the negative things, but there's also so much good and so much really wonderful things happening at the same time. And I think it's going to be up to us as human beings to kind of sort things out and see where our priorities are. But no, for me, this is not dystopian. I can't go there.
No, and it comes across as really interesting. The other thing too is that, I was looking at it. I've spent a lot of time looking at this because I think it's just an extraordinary piece. Uh, I actually could see a human in here as well.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yes. So, in actually, if you look at the wings and the lower part, those would actually be the lungs, just
See,
below the shoulders.
this is what I love about abstract art.
Right.
This is the power. This is the challenge and the power of abstract art.
Well, it's funny, like Skojo, so you're one of 14 artists who created a piece for this collection. I think yours was the first to arrive, wasn't it, Skojo?
It was, yeah. Well, and you were sending me a lot of things in progress too. So that's a little bit of the reason why I was like, is this done yet? Are you going to color it? Just so you know. I loved it. I just didn't know where it was.
Well, it's funny. So Skojo is the art director for this, and he's just like, yeah, this is going to be great. And we're like, okay, well, we trust you. But you never know what's going to come back. And then when this thing arrived, I was like, wow.
People are blown away.
It's going to be hard for other people to match this. Now, some other people did some amazing things too. So,
yes, I think so. I was really worried. That's why I wanted to get something early to Skojo, because I had no idea where anybody else was headed. And so I thought, well, if you all hate it, I'll make a stab at something else. But I feel very humbled and honored that I got to be part of this, and I'm really excited about the project, and really happy that you all were cool about my vision for this. So thank you.
So Skojo, as a painter, what do you think of this type of work and some of the other things that Michael's done?
It's amazing. I couldn't even imagine trying to replicate something like that. It's insane what code can do. No, I'm in awe. I mean, I was going to ask Michael, how does someone like me, who has always tried to figure out what's the next step, where do I take my art, and I'm seeing all these incredible things done with code, and I want to start to dabble in it. So my question to you is, and I'm sure a lot of viewers out there are thinking the same thing, how does someone start learning about that thing? I don't want to learn code, but can you recommend any interesting tools so that we can start playing around with how an algorithm can manipulate our images and help us?
That's a really interesting question, and actually there are a number of different avenues. So there are some people who do generative art that's all strictly code based, and I would say I would put them kind of in the purist realm if you were to talk about generative art, and so that does take some knowledge base of learning about that, and it's not impossible. But depending on the personality of the artist, see, and I think that
Brett knows I don't do math.
Some people are good with both feet in either world or both worlds. So you may have heard that people have been using words to create art through AI, and there's a program called VQGAN plus Clip. It's a public domain through Google, I believe, and there are a number of different links and sites that allow you to get on and do this. But it's kind of an interesting experiment. I played around with it. The downside is you're limited in actual pixel size to the imagery you can create. But in terms of just kind of getting your feet wet with something, it's kind of a cool process. So in the program, you can you can type in a limited number of words, like owl, in owl Picasso style.
Uh-huh.
And so what's been done, I guess, originally hackers went into some AI program and managed to get text inputs to speak to the AI program. That's my understanding from having read sort of the background of this. And so the AI has a big library of imagery that's tied to words. And so basically the program interprets the words that you have given it, and it can go through any number of iterations that you allow, and you can seed an image, you can there are a number of different variations that you can play with. But yeah, it's VQGAN plus clip. And if you do a Google search on it, you'll find a whole lot. Some sites allow you, you have to pay for some of them, but they allow you to do more than what you can on the free sites. I think getting your feet wet, this is a nice way to go. I've also been playing around with various other AI platforms like Playform and others. Again, the limitation is, for me, it's a limitation, is that since even though I consider myself a digital artist, I create my work for print. So the end result for my work is a printed image. And so for me, I need enough pixels to make prints large enough that I feel are interesting. Now, if you're just doing something to appear on smartphones, or you just want it to appear online, then some of these platforms are really nice. And you can learn some of these things pretty cheaply or for free. There are a number of free programs out there that allow you to get a sense for what AI generated kinds of images are possible. I see this as still in its infancy, that we're just scratching the surface with this, just like people who are getting into doing like 3D stuff with the Oculus headset or others. And I think like with NFTs, I think we're just at the infancy of these things. I know there's been a lot of hoo-ha about NFTs lately, especially with some of the big names have gotten in making big money and things like that. But I really think that this technology can be a lot more robust than what's been done to this point. And I think that's usually true with any emerging technology, is people kind of scratch the surface, and then the next generation to follow digs a little deeper or looks at it in a different way. And all of a sudden you see, oh, this technology can also, emerge in this way or that way. For me, the various avenues have their strengths and weaknesses, and I think it's up to the artist to see what works for them. And as artists, we need to explore. I think we're in a society at times that downplay or focuses on failure. As artists, we can't see failure as a bad thing. You learn from it. You try stuff out, and you don't, if you're not pressing yourself to try things where you don't know if it's going to turn out or how it may turn out, you're never going to stretch as an artist. And I think what I try to tell younger artists is try stuff out. If you don't like it, you're going to learn something along the way. And that learning along the way makes you a better artist as you keep exploring. And I think fear of failure holds people back. And as creators, as creative individuals, we have to be fearless. And if we fall flat on our face, well, we'll learn something from it, and so be it.
I think fearless should be the theme of this conversation.
Fearless Grandma Moses.
Yes.
That's right. From physics to game maker to artist, fearless, the entire path. Yeah. Skojo, you can ask the closing question. If you like.
I can. Jeez. All right, this might be a little bit loaded, but I will just do it anyway. From the interviews I've seen of you, it seems like spirituality plays a big role in your work. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So my physics background, my creativity kind of is the centerpiece that started me thinking of things in a very spiritual way. And I don't want to get too deep into this other area, but on my dad's side of the family, which I never knew him because he left when I was a real small child, but there's some Native American background there. And so I've explored that very heavily. And so that's a strong mix into it as well. But I would say for me, I just think that the universe, as we understand it and as we're continuing to understand more and more, is this fantastic place that I consider just the mere fact that Brett, you and I are talking to each other right now in very different places, and that we're talking about things that are very, for me, deep and interesting. I see my existence and all existence, from protons to whales to people to planets and galaxies, as sacred. There's the mere fact that all of this exists, to me, is my spirituality. That's what I base it on. I have a very different notion of, I don't like to use the word God because people, kind of make it, the old guy in the sky somewhere. But for me, it's very abstract. It's this notion that there's this, that I think mathematics is at the heart of this as well. And so for me, combining physics, creativity, the things that I've learned in my journey following some of the native traditions as well, some of the indigenous traditions, they all have to work together for me, or there's some kind of conflict and resolution. And I have made them come together internally. And for me, it really does come down to, we're here. And to me, there's a level of sacredness just in that fact. And when we start thinking about our consciousness and how that ties in with everything else, and how physicists, neuroscientists, and many leading spiritual leaders and elders, there's this convergence. And I really do think that if we can strip away the facade of religions and spiritual practices and look to the core, it's, I think, what Brett was seeing in the light in the back of my owl NFT, that kind of is my conceptual embodiment of that. So I don't know. It's hard to put into words. It really is kind of hard to put into words, but it drives my work. It drives my thinking about my work. and it continues. It's you know, and that's why I find fascinating is that it's ever growing. And I think we need that. If we land in a place that we feel like really, really satisfied, like we know everything, or it's up to God to know everything and we can just sit back. I just think that's a lazy way of being. I think we need to be active, and we need to be involved, and we need to be open, because if we don't, then we die. Either we die from cutting ourselves off from everything around us, or we die because there's nothing nurturing us. And as human beings, I think that that's vital to, as much as we need food and air and water to exist. I really do think that.
Okay. Fearless, active, and open. And by the way, humankind has struggled forever with this, with explaining spirituality. So, so a loaded question.
No, I appreciate
the toughest question that you could ever ask anybody. Good job bringing it home, Skojo. That's tough. I love it though. I mean, what an interesting way to complete our conversation today. And I'm sure we'll do this again because this has been so fun. So, Michael Pierre Price, how can the viewers today learn more about what you're doing?
Oh gosh. Well, if you go to my website, michaelpierreprice.com, that's got my latest things going on, or on Instagram, MPP Digital Art.
So we'll put it in the link below.
In the link below. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we'll absolutely do that. Okay, well, thank you so much. Skojo, any parting words?
Just thank you. Thank you for being a part of this. I really appreciate it.
I'm honored. I love what I'm part of here with this. So thank you.
Well, we're so happy to have you. I mean, we're having so much fun with this. All right, everybody. I am Creatorius Rex on the Twitter. You can find me there. You can find me here each week talking to artists and company founders, and every once in a while talking about the news with Scott Leach. So come on back, subscribe. I always forget to tell people, subscribe to the Niftorian Show, and give us some feedback. We'd love to hear it. And definitely go check out Michael Pierre Price's artwork broadly, and specifically check out his incredible Founders Collection Mint Pass from the Niftorian Project. All right, everybody, we really appreciate everything that you've been able to do in Michael Price, and everybody for watching today. Until next week, happy hunting, everyone.